update. So today we're discussing about SMEs and powering SMEs. So SMEs, as we know, are the lifeblood of Nigeria's economy. They contribute tremendously to employment and economic development in Nigeria. Over 96% of operating businesses in Nigeria are SMEs. That's amongst the highest rate in Africa and indeed the world. The lack of electricity is a singular, most concerning infrastructure challenge for SMEs in Nigeria. The prevailing lack of electricity stifles growth and productivity and has led to the shutdown of many manufacturing companies. Whilst there has been some focus on clean energy upgrade solutions for domestic use, upgrade solutions for commercial and industrial use are still largely untapped for small and large-scale businesses. So as the economy reopens in the wake of the COVID-19 pandemic, already existing and intending upgrade clean energy practitioners should look towards providing appropriate energy solutions to SMEs. Therefore, this dialogue will focus on appropriate strategies to implement upgrade for SME around the country. Specifically, the objectives of this discourse will be to highlight experiences and knowledge as regards the nuances of providing commercial and industrial upgrade solutions, address the reasons for the current hesitation to adopt upgrade alternatives by SMEs and their possible solutions, to highlight current efforts of the government and private institutions while raising further awareness for SME electrification, to highlight capacity gaps limiting the provision of off-grid solutions for commerce and industry, and also to discuss growth opportunities for the off-grid industry through SMEs. So to help us unwrap all of this, we will have a small but great panel of experts representing the key stakeholders, the SMEs, the government, and the private energy developers. First, we have Mr. Eke Ubiji. Mr. Ubiji is the Executive Secretary to the Governing Council of the Nigerian Association of Small and Medium Enterprises. The NASME is a business membership organization for micro, small, and medium enterprises in Nigeria. Mr. Ubiji is a member of the board of NASME Quality Assurance Limited, which is a conformity assessment body and is a subsidiary company of NASME, for which he is the Chief Operating Officer. He's also a Quality Management System Lead Auditor, an Environmental Management System Lead Auditor, and Quality Award Lead Assessor. He was also a member of the National Quality Infrastructure Project Steering and Technical Committee, which was funded by the EU and supported by the federal government of Nigeria. Mr. Ubiji, you are most welcome. Next, we have Mr. Suleiman Babamanu. Suleiman is a senior technical project manager at the Rural Electrification Agency of Nigeria, under the project management unit of the Nigerian Electrification project. He leads the implementation of the energizing initiatives. He leads the implementation of the Energizing Economies Initiative, a federal government of Nigeria initiative which aims to provide clean and affordable power supply to economic clusters across the country. Suleiman also leads the Jigawa Energy City project, which aims to provide 1 gigawatt of solar power to the national grid. He supports the solar home system component of the NEP through technical due diligence for applicants and also supports the collection and analysis of geospatial data, energy audit, and community surveys for development of mini grids and solar home systems in Nigeria. Suleiman, you are most welcome.
Thank you very much for having me.
And finally, we have Washima Mede. Washima is the co-founder and he's a co-founder and the CEO of Prado Power Limited. Prado Power is a renewable energy company that offers a wide array of solutions aimed at enhancing energy access in Nigeria. Prado Power is currently focused on deploying turnkey renewable energy solutions to rural and peri-urban communities in Nigeria, including renewable energy mini-grids, solar home systems. And the company has set a target of empowering 100 communities or 200,000 people with reliable energy access by 2022. Washima is a trained civil and structural engineer, and before founding Prado Power in 2014, he was actively involved in designing and implementing infrastructure projects such as roads, bridges, and power plants. Washima has served on various committees, including the Infrastructure Technical Working Group for the development of the National Integrated Infrastructure Master Plan. He's also a registered member of the Council for the Regulation of Engineering in Nigeria, the Nigerian Society of Engineers, and the Project Management Institute. Washima, you are very welcome.
Thank you very much for that.
And finally, to the audience, thank you very much for tuning in and for your participation. You can actively participate in the discussion by using the raise your hand function or sending in your questions in the chat box, and we will do our best to have all of them addressed. So with that, let's get it going. Mr. Ubiji, I will start with you, sir. Could you please share a bit about NASME? What are its roles and functions as regards SMEs in Nigeria? Did Mr. Ubiji drop off? Perhaps there's a connection issue. Okay, so we'll come back to Mr. Ubiji. Suleiman, I'll come to you then. So the REA has electrified a significant SME cluster through Energizing Economies Initiative. What exactly are the REA's goals, achievements, and expectations in this regard?
All right, thank you very much, Led, and thank you very much for the Next Year Power Dialogue for having me for the second time in this panel. Just to give a brief overview of the Energizing Economies Initiative, this is a federal government-supported project that aims to provide sustainable electricity to economic and industrial clusters across the country. So what the federal government does through the REA, which is the implementing agency, is to provide that enabling environment for private sector participation. So the project is private sector led. What you would find here is that we as government, as REA, we provide all of the sort of the pre-development activities, market assessment, providing market intelligence, things around energy audits, feasibility studies around the sites, also supporting with all the engagements with the state government, as well as the agreements between the developers and the market association, as well as all the necessary licenses that is required to be able to develop this project. In terms of approach, it is a phased approach. We have up to 3 phases. Phase 1 would be where you would find active participation of the government, that is REA, guiding developers, throughout from sort of identifying sites down to operations and maintenance of the plants. So, and then this we're targeting between 10 to 20 sort of sites, which is deliberately targeted at developers or investors that are, that have high appetite for risk and, for investment. So under that phase, we've already powered about 10 markets, which has a cumulative number of shops to the tune of about 13,000. These markets have different approaches, ranging from gas to solar PV to connection to already existing power plants. These markets are in Lagos, in Aba, Ondo, Ogun, Kano, Edo states. So in terms of this phase 2, So what we intend to do is to sort of ease out the government's involvement, develop the markets to a level where, the private sector is able to, conveniently and comfortably invest in these markets. So we started with the first 10, and we're planning to grow it up to the 300 markets. So we've already identified up to 100 markets that are in the pipeline. So a lot of pre-development work needs to be done. So on phase 2, for example, we want to sort of also guide developers and investors to how to sort of get access to financing, and also some fiscal policies that we've been working with in terms of getting in for duty waivers and pioneer status. And then be able to, grow the market as it's a nascent sort of environment, grow the market to the level where the private sector is able to conveniently participate. So so far we have commissioned these markets, and they are already currently operational, and we aim to, hopefully with the support of the private sector, grow this project to the level which we want to see it. Thank you.
Thank you. That is fantastic. I took a note there. The distribution of the developments currently under phase 1. You have a very nice distribution across the country, which is good to see. A quick follow-up question to that: your phase 2 and beyond, the 100 to 300 developments in view. What timeline are you looking at for that?
So, because, like I mentioned earlier on, the government is not funding these projects, right? Sometimes it's a bit difficult to allocate timelines to projects like this when you're expecting private sector investment. So, and that is why on our side, we want to sort of be able to create that environment as fast as possible in terms of incentives and access to capital, where we're able to tell the developers that, look, in fact, even in phase 1, for the first time in the off-grid space, I know you're aware of this, under the EEI, through the CBN, one of our developers was able to access almost $1 million of funding to sort of invest in these markets. So we're seeing a lot of commercial banks, get more and more getting interested in this space, and understanding, especially from lessons we've learned from phase 1, that first of all, it is doable. Off-grid electricity is actually doable, and the partnerships with private developers, the market association, the state government, and even with the DISCO is actually doable, and it's happening. So in terms of timeline, I would say over the next 12 to 24 months, we would want to see that the second phase has been at least to a certain level of development. And then beyond that, ease of the participation of the government. So what we have done with the support of sort of some of the donor agencies like USAID is to develop a manual. So this manual is, we have developed an end-to-end process. We call it the 22 steps. From what do you do in identifying the site, what do you look out for, down to sort of operations and maintenance. So all of these steps, the templates for energy audits, the templates for agreement, tariff structuring, and things like that have all been highlighted. So that way we can hand over these manuals to developers, and they're able to comfortably go through them and be guided on how to go about implementing these projects. Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you very much for that response. Mr. Ubiji, we have you back on now, so I will come to you with your first question. If you could share a bit more about the NASME, what its roles are, and its functions regarding SMEs in Nigeria. You are currently on mute, so maybe just unmute yourself. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much. Can you hear me now?
Perfectly, thank you.
Yes, okay, thank you very much. Basically, NASME stands for the Nigerian Association of Small and Medium Enterprises, NASME. And secondly, it's a business membership organization. I know when you say business membership organization, it's like any organization where whether it's professional or work related, that you have members with common interests join to pursue their own common interests. So to answer your question, NASME is there to promote and protect the interests of micro, small, and medium enterprises in Nigeria. And they do it in different ways, either through advocacy, to advocate for policies that are favorable to the interests of members, or policy propositions to the authorities. It could be at the federal level, the state level, and so on and so forth. And the structure of the organization is this way. We operate at the national level. We have a national governing council that oversees the running of the association. Then we have the national secretariat, where I am. Okay. So if there are issues of common interest to members nationwide, the national carries it out. Then if there are issues of common interest to members at the state level, like currently we have presence in about 34 states in Nigeria. So we have state chapters in those places. So the state chapters will pursue those interests that are common to members in particular states. So that's how it's doing it in brief. So I don't take much of your time. But if there are other further questions, you can go ahead to ask.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. That's a great overview of NASME. Let me quickly jump to Washima now, and I'm very conscious of time. So Washima, for you, if you could highlight Prado's work in the commercial and industrial spaces in Nigeria, just to give us, I guess, an introduction and an overview of your business, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Saleh. Thank you for having me. So as you mentioned earlier, Prado Power is a renewable energy company, and we basically try to play in all the segments of the renewable energy system. So we try to develop solutions and strategies for effective electrification of off-grid communities, small and medium enterprises, and residential homes. So basically that's what we do. So far we have deployed over 2,000 solar home systems to homes in Abuja and in Lagos, and we have deployed 2 mini grids in Ondo State. We were on course to deploy 3 more mini grids this year. One to Benue State, another in Adamawa State, and the third one in Idonre in Ondo State. So basically, what we do is we come to a community or a business or home. We analyze the energy needs, and we provide the best and most cost-effective solution for their energy challenges. And yes, we also try to target specific industries like educational sector, healthcare, and agriculture, where once we deploy a renewable energy solution, we also deploy devices that would essentially enhance the socioeconomic welfare in those areas. So we approach it from not just infrastructure delivery, but then also to try and see how we can elevate the livelihoods of businesses and residents and off-grid communities in Nigeria.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Washima. And I'll stay with you for the next question. And it'll probably be double-barreled here. What business models, in your opinion, work best for developers that target SMEs and industrial customers? And secondly, why do we have currently just few developers targeting SME electrification? What are the barriers?
Okay, so in terms of the strategy for deploying renewable energy solutions to SMEs, I would say what works best is looking at a consumer financing kind of approach. However, due to difficulty in accessing financing and due to the lack of a structured environment for that type of approach, what we usually do is we encourage one-off payments as much as possible for SMEs. And also we try to offer them solutions that will complement whatever energy infrastructure we're providing. So solutions like to have energy efficiency at the back of your mind when you deploy renewable energy solutions, the way you even think about electricity as a whole. So things like using LED bulbs, for instance, things like looking for devices or offering them access to devices that will basically cut down their energy consumption and make it affordable for them so that they see the value in deploying the solution. So maybe short term is expensive, but over a certain period, there will be significant savings and the solutions will make sense for them. So really the financial system or the financial space for renewable energy in Nigeria is a bit complex, not as dynamic as you have in other countries.
Yep.
But then as Suleiman rightly pointed out, financial institutions are beginning to latch onto this space. And up-and-coming fintech companies as well. I've talked to a couple, and they also see this as a space that they can play and offer solutions that would essentially prevent SMEs from paying upfront completely for a device and have them pay over time and make it more affordable for them.
Okay, thank you very much for that, Washima. Suleiman, so I'll come back to you, Suleiman. Again, a double-barrel question here. I think they're both related. Based on your experience, can you, for us, what are the nuances involved in providing off-grid power for SMEs? What situations are unique to SMEs? And then alongside that, what are the biggest oppositions that, in your opinion, developers should expect, perhaps from a regulatory or policy point of view?
Yeah, thank you, Saleh. In terms of nuances, first of all, when you're targeting SMEs, unlike the conventional grid, it is a bottom-up approach. So you need to be able to understand your customers very well. You need to understand their number. You need to understand their business activities, so that you're able to, on one hand, provide a system that is able to cater for their needs. On the other hand, be able to design your business model and have your financial model to be able to, conveniently finance the project. You don't want to oversize a power plant or a system, and you don't want to undersize that. So it's very, very important to understand your customers, and that's why we pay very, very key attention to energy audits, which is very, very comprehensive in understanding the number of shops in the market, the customers, their business activities, and sort of income levels in these markets. Secondly, you're going to be dealing with a sort of customers that you have to some extent, convince them that they might be paying a tariff that is slightly more than what the conventional tariff is from the DISCO. That is for markets that are already connected. It is an easier conversation if the market is completely off-grid. So, for example, a market like Agri area market, which is the largest we have in our portfolio for now, about 37,000 shops, which is completely off-grid. And then Sabongari, for example, in Kano, that has been completely disconnected. So it's easier to have that conversation with somebody who is already using petrol or diesel generator to power their shops to sell him the narrative that, this is inefficient. It is also dangerous, as we have seen fire outbreaks in markets. And then we are providing you a solution that it's not only going to be affordable to you, it is also going to be efficient. And you have the power to sort of control what you consume, and you're only going to pay for that. So that's another thing. And then secondly, something around, especially for our projects that has federal government presence in it, there's the notion that this power may be free, and so you have to communicate this very well, that people would have to pay for power. And then that's why we have made it mandatory for all developers to establish customer service shops in each of these markets, that the customers are able to reach out to in case where they want to register to connect, or if they have any sort of issues. So essentially, you need to understand the business models of these customers. You need to design your system that is going to cater for the needs. And also, something else you also want to look at is the issue of energy efficiency. So, for example, especially for markets that are, powered using solar power, sometimes because you're dealing with limited amount of roof space, you may not be able to, if you have a section of the market that has a lot of grinding machines or tailors that are using a lot of irons and things like that, sometimes it becomes a bit difficult to, 100% provide them. So you want to do some level of retrofitting to provide energy efficient appliances and sell that narrative to the customers, and be able to, convince them to switch from what they're currently using to what they are. And then bearing in mind that some of these appliances are not readily available, and it's also an additional cost to, to the developer, and depending on what type of business model you're going to, be deploying in the market. So these are some of the things that that you need to consider, and in designing, for example, a market, developing a market. Thank you.
Awesome, fantastic. Thank you for that. Okay, Mr. Ubiji, I will come back to you now, and then I'm seeing in the chat box a few interesting questions, and then we'll move to some of the questions from the audience. But Mr. Ubiji, for you, can you explain for us, despite the power challenge, and I'm talking about grid now, the rates of adoption of clean, sustainable energy alternatives by SMEs is slow, even when proven to be, in the long term, more profitable and less costly, more profitable. What are the reasons for this apparent reluctance from the SME community?
Thank you very much, Saleh, for that question, and also other panelists, because I can see somebody like Imam Suleiman Babamanu and also Washima Mede, they are very competent in this area. The simple answer to your question is cost. Cost. Because I can tell you a lot of micro, small, and medium enterprises will have this alternative, which is renewable energy. It's renewable energy, and it's a very good alternative. It's a very good option. But the cost of acquiring it, that's the main challenge. If you look at, we say, micro, small, and medium enterprises, micro is unique in its own way. In terms of staff, capital, and all whatnot, it's lower compared with small. Then for small, you graduate to medium scale. In terms of capacity, I can tell you some medium enterprises, or largely the medium enterprises that will have capacity to acquire renewable energy facility. But people from the micro, small categories may not have the capacity. But that is not the end. If they cannot do it, there must be a way by which the government will come in to assist them. Because I had Madam Suleiman talking about what they are doing at area market, the market in Kano and all whatnot. The government can come in to assist, or other people that can fund such infrastructure. I can tell you we have that. There was a time when I was looking at the work of the Bank of Industry. In their portfolio, power is one of such. But I don't know how well that is being done now. So I don't want to talk much on that. But the other institutions that have come up, look at the Development Bank of Nigeria. The Development Bank will find a way, even though they don't fund things directly, they can use commercial banks as retail banks. But like what Madam Suleiman said, area market is a huge market. If the tenants there can come together, organize themselves very well, I can tell you they can access funds to carry on with this project. So to answer your question, Sele, the first challenge, which is the most critical, is funding. And if solution can, that's why I mentioned government. That's a way of trying to provide solution. But there could be other opportunities. There could be other opportunities through which we can address this for this category of business people.
Yeah. Interesting. Thank you, sir, for that. So when you started off with cost being the challenge, you clarified toward the end of your response there that it's the initial funding because of the upfront cost, let's say, and not necessarily down the road. Okay, fantastic. Thank you all so far. We will shift the conversation to looking at actions and the actors to make all of this happen in terms of advancing the initiative. But before we do that, a few questions from the panel, from the participants. And the first one here from well, there's no name, anonymous, and I believe it may have been discussed already. It is believed that renewable energy is the way to go. However, the participation of the private sector is low. What is responsible for this? I mean, if I take a stab based on what's been said already, and then maybe some of the panelists can chime in here. Suleiman, you talked about businesses being investor ready and making sure that they have sized up their market, done their energy audits, have robust business plans to show how they're going to be sustainable, and that will attract the investment. And that is one of the areas that we are seeing is a deficit now. Hence the if you like, the reluctance of the investor community to participate. Would you agree, or is there more you want to add to respond to that question? What is responsible for low private sector participation?
Yeah, thank you, Sele. I think that's of course that's one of the key issues associated with lack of participation. But I even want to say that lately, based off of what the off-grid market has experienced in the past, let's say, a couple of years or 3 years back, we have seen a lot of shift. Initially, you can't have an off-grid conversation 10 years ago or so. No one would even listen to you. But right now, even under some of the projects that the REA is implementing, like the Nigerian Electrification project, we've seen a huge amount of participation coming in. Of course, because we have also in that program tried to address this particular problem of access to funding, which that program is providing some grants to participate. And we have to also be very, very realistic. Unless you have you have to be very, very creative. The payback period for renewable energy project is still a bit far. And then access to data is also another issue that the investors are not privy to. to understand exactly what is going on in the market and how they can penetrate. Another thing that is also prohibitive sometimes is the issue with incentives as it relates to duties and charges at the port. So a lot of countries started off by providing these kind of incentives to allow the market to grow to a certain level before charging people. So we have an issue of from experience and from what we've heard from developers that there's a lot of charges when you import some of these appliances or components in order for you to deploy the systems. Access to finance, data, and then fiscal incentives that are available, things that are make some of the investors scare away from investing. But I would like to say that there's a lot of participation we've seen lately under some of the programs that we are currently implementing.
Fantastic, thank you. Washima, as a developer yourself, I don't know whether you want to chime in on the response to that particular question. What's your experience as regards attracting funding?
Okay, yeah. So attracting funding is a bit of a challenge, especially attracting it locally. But then what we've seen is we've been able to develop a network of funders who are very interested in coming into this space and trying to change the energy narrative in Nigeria. So funding companies like the REA, obviously through their programs now. It's all on, and several other companies that are in country and trying to obviously change the narrative of the energy in the country. So we are still trying to see how we can bring in some more players. I mentioned particularly the fintech institutions because they are able to sort of through their structure, they're able to attract, especially even the unbanked people, and have a situation whereby they have the structure, they have the system ready, and they can have players from the SMEs come on board their platforms and provide solutions like consumer financing, such that SMEs don't have to pay upfront for equipment. So there are so many strategies that are in play in terms of financing, and it's not perfect yet, but there's a lot of progress. Yes.
Thank you very much, Washima. So there's another question here from Lai Agoro. He says he would like to know what is delaying a policy proposed by the Ministry of Power in delineation of areas into generating and utilization of solar energy. And I'm thinking, Suleiman, that you might be best placed to share some thoughts on this. What is delaying the Ministry of Power?
I'm not sure I completely get the question, but I think you should give a lot of credit to the government, especially when it comes to off-grid electrification by, introducing the mini-grid regulation. From what we have seen, I've attended conferences all around the continent and around the globe, and the feedback is Nigeria has one of the best mini-grid regulations that is out there, because it clearly states that one of the key components of the mini-grid regulation is that it allows you for a sort of, what's it called, cost-reflective tariff to the end users, and it clearly states what happens when the grid arrives. And then there's also an opportunity for interconnected mini grids where, you know, three parties can come together between the community, the developer, and the disco to sort of sign a tripartite agreement to be able to, you know, power these communities. So the policy is already in place. If that's the policy that you're referring to, the question is referring to, and this policy has attracted a lot of investment in the off-grid space. It's one of when you have, for example, when you say last carbon check, this is like one of the, you know, biggest encouragements to the mini grid developers, especially to be able to, you know, have a clear understanding of, you know, the policy and what needs to happen. And even on the next side, as far as our programs are concerned, we have sort of created a fast track team where once you apply for either a license or not a license, a permit or registration, it is usually fast tracked so that you get your necessary approvals. Finally, what the regulation does, it also allows for, it clearly states what happens within a threshold of generation. So for example, between 0 and 100 kilowatts, you can only register, and then above that, below 1 megawatt, you need a permit. And there's a reason why you need a permit, and it has to do with what happens when the grid arrives. So yeah, I think I've answered this question.
I hope it does. If the person who asked the question could let us know, that would be great. The questions are coming in thick and fast, and we want to try and get through as many of them as possible. So we'll try and keep our answers succinct. But before taking more questions, I would like for us to move to the second part of the discussion, which is, as I mentioned before, actions and actors for progress. So, Mr. Ubiji, I'll come back to you here now. The question here is, what do SMEs need to see or experience to improve their demand for off-grid and clean energy alternatives? And then I guess on the back of that, if you could discuss the growth opportunities for the off-grid industry through SMEs.
Thank you very much, Tele. If I may start from the last part of your question, there are a lot of opportunities for growth in the off-grid sector of power. What do I mean by that? Initially, when we started this discussion, you asked the question, so what are the hindrances, or what are the things that hinder SMEs participating in this process? I say cost. But one of the things that can help is that in Nigeria today, I don't know if you're aware that there is what we call business incubation centers around the country. As of today, there are about 37 of them, if I'm not mistaken, if they've not increased, located in different state capitals and localities. Now, a lot of them are being run through the public power system, which is not really helping them. So if you want to, this is where renewable energy will come in. And people in this state, let me give, for example, the one at Agege has about, it is 46 or 47 MSMEs in that center. You understand? And it's an enclosed place being run through what you call PHCN. Now, as they're having difficulties with that, if you get renewable energy, that's a big market for any renewable energy company to handle. If you are seeing it the way I'm seeing it. So these centers are located all over the country, and that's a huge market. I'm talking of SMEs that are within an enclosure big enough. So they are scattered like that, and if they are working very well, for God's sake, That's a huge market for renewable energy producers. Secondly, we've been talking about this African Continental Free Trade Agreement, which is a new initiative introduced by the AU to help our SMEs grow and also enter the international market, especially within the African continent. There's no way Nigerian SMEs can completely explore this opportunity without renewable energy. So people in that sector, the potentials are quite huge. It's just for them to stop, and possibly more players are expected. Can you take up the second part of your question, please? I think I've answered the first part.
Yep.
Can you remember the first question you asked? There were two parts. The opportunities side.
And the first one was what do SMEs need to improve their demand for off-grid clean energy alternatives? What do they need to see or experience to improve the demand?
What they need to experience is quite huge, because in terms of production, with the current rate, their production will be affected. Their production will be affected seriously. And when you produce below capacity, the SME will be at a loss. That's serious. The SME will be at a loss. That's that. Then SME want to do a business that there will be increased revenue through increased intensity of production activities. So if you experience that, definitely you need more. Renewable energy is the way to go. There's no doubt about that. I can tell you for sure. The few people I know that are using it, even though they complain of cost, with regards to competitiveness, comparing the cost of their products or cost of production with products from other climes that have reduced costs in the supply of power, you see that renewable energy is the way out.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Mr. Obiji.
Thank you.
So, Washima, I will come to you now. Someone asked a very quick question. I think I made mention of developers, and the question was asked, what do we mean by developers? So developers are the operators and the providers of energy solutions in the off-grid space. So a business like Prado Power, for instance, who develop their energy solutions, they are a developer. Just to clarify that, as we might be using the term a bit more. So Washima, for you, the question here is, what factors would encourage more deployments to commercial clusters by the developers? And I want to add to the back of that, I'm just going to be piling the questions now. So the first one is, what factors would encourage more deployments to commercial customers and clusters? And the second, a very interesting question, is, can developers include consumer financing as part of the solution packages for target SMEs? What needs to be in place to achieve such an arrangement?
Those are very, very good questions, Seven. So I'll start with the second question. So that's very, very important, and I've tried to talk on that a lot today already. I think that's a very important aspect, because if you look at the structure of the electricity market currently, especially for the off-grid space, you notice that you have developers, but then because of the major challenge of access to finance, they are unable to effectively they're unable to effectively cater to the SME market and provide solutions to and provide solutions to ensure that everybody is covered adequately. So access to finance is very, very important.
Yeah.
And I think all on and a lot of financial organizations are trying to see how they can come up with strategies to raise capital for these deployments. I also know that the REA, through their programs, are also giving out grants to facilitate provision of this kind of services and infrastructure to the off-grid space and the SME space. And so yes, so if that's in place, then the spread will be more. Developers currently struggle with the fact that you have to deploy renewable energy solutions, and then you have to also cater to things like training for the SMEs, providing tailor-made solutions, like you have to discuss essentially with each SME to find out what their needs are and what solutions will work for them. And it's a bit of a stretch to have that combined with things like consumer financing and looking for solutions, looking for consumer financing. You know, the amount of capital that it will take to do all of that is quite huge. So a lot of these things need to come into place. What we are doing at Power currently is we are working towards establishing a huge retail section of our business that will cater to energy efficient devices for the agriculture sector, for a lot of key sectors. So devices that can work with renewable energy solutions and offer significant savings for SMEs, such that their baselines are improved and are better. But then, even though we do that, we will still need the financing to back up whatever strategies we have in play. So I think institutions, fintech companies, to come into the space and support where they are. There are a lot of wins that can be made from the proper participation of all the important players in the energy space. Yeah. So in terms of having adequate spread and doing more for commercial and industrial customers, yeah, it's very possible. It's very, very possible to do that. And a lot of renewable energy companies are currently working on that. A lot of my colleagues in the space are looking at the commercial and industrial sectors and are providing them to hospitals, to industries. So solutions that will basically reduce the cost of energy for these facilities and these clusters. For example, our mini grid in Idore in Ondo State is supposed to be a biomass plant, and it's supposed to power the sawmilling cluster in Idore. It's a huge sawmilling cluster. They run completely on diesel generators, and you know the kind of activity you see there is the kind of activity you know that if you have a renewable energy solution,
yep,
it will improve their baseline, and you're basically taking their feedstock and churning it into your plant. So it's very sustainable in terms of the waste management. At the same time, it's going to make their businesses more profitable.
Yeah.
So these are some of the kind of solutions we think about our work.
Great stuff. Thank you very much, Washima. And a great last point you mentioned there about being able to, this particular plant being able to run on renewable. If they're running solely on diesel generators now, I think the statistic is that it adds about 30% to the operating expenditure. So imagine, getting that burden lifted if you're able to run on renewable. Fantastic. Thanks for that. Suleiman, I will come to you now. Can you highlight current efforts that the government and private institutions can make, or are making rather, whilst raising further awareness for SME electrification? And then in usual Sele style, I'll add a second question to that. Are there any specific policies that support off-grid electrification for SMEs?
Thank you very much. Just before I respond to your question, I would like to say to Mr. Obiji that I want to extend the support of the REA to your organization, and to the extent that we are happy to, look at some of these SME clusters as we are putting together sort of a portfolio of projects that we want to sort of introduce to these developers, and we want to, of course, look at the most attractive ones. If you have, markets or clusters that fall into this category, then you can please, we can take it up after this dialogue, and we can exchange emails, and you can send us some sites, and we are happy to look at them. Yes, in terms of the question, so the Nigerian government is doing a lot to support, of green electrification and renewables. Like I mentioned earlier on, sort of the Nigerian electrification project is a $550 million sort of project that is funded by both the World Bank and the African Development Bank, which provides sort of grants to solar home systems and mini grid companies to deploy their systems. There's a lot of information on the Nigeria Electrification project on our website. I don't want to go deep into it. Please, I encourage you to go to the RE website to look at all the different components. But of particular interest is what we are doing on the productive use space, where there's a specific component under the AFDB funded NEP that is specifically looking at productive use, because we understand that, of course, in the off-grid space, in the mini grid, in the community, for example, there's an issue of capacity utilization, and what we want to encourage is for these developers or a third party to come in and look at how they can provide energy efficient appliances, for productive uses, whether it is grinding, whether it is tailoring, or irrigation pumps, for example, that would take up the capacity of the mini grid. So we are doing that. We are also, so there are a lot of projects on that electrification project as well, or electrification fund, that just last week an announcement was made to encourage public-private partnerships to develop mini grids and provide solar home systems to sort of communities. So there's a lot of awareness campaigns that we carry out on our social media handles as well as our websites, and in conferences we attend, to encourage this participation for this, and just tying this into policies. Like I mentioned earlier on, the mini grid policies always is something that we make reference to. Availability of grants money available for developers to come and access is an incentive that is expected to promote the participation of developers into this space. One thing maybe that I also want to add on the side of the developers is there seems to be a limited capacity in understanding the technical and financial due diligence that needs to happen for companies to be able to access financing. So it's very, very important that companies or developers understand what financiers are looking for in order to be able to attract funding to develop their projects. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Suleiman. I think we should take some questions now from the listening viewers, but I'll quickly summarize, some of my takeaways from this segment in terms of the actions and actors. So it's clear that there is a huge opportunity, given the challenges and issues. Naturally, there's a huge opportunity in this space as well. We need the developers and the operators in this space to be ready to do their homework and make themselves attractable for investment. The financiers are on standby. They just want to see that the opportunities are viable from a financing point of view. The market is there from a consumer point of view, but then we also need to work out solutions on how to make these energy solutions, if you like, more affordable for the average consumer. So there's a lot of opportunity in there and a lot of stakeholders and actors in that regard. So I'll quickly go to the questions, and if we can maybe just try and go through these questions as quickly as possible. A very quick question here for Mr. Obiji. Someone is asking if you can share a list of the members of the NASME, if there's somewhere that is published, a list of members and their power requirements and locations, if you have this information, and contact information as well. I'm trying to see the name of the question, Ejido, I think. So I'm not sure the listener's interest, but perhaps it's to help facilitate some progress for the institution and its members.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Sele, for that question. Really, we don't really, as a matter of policy, we don't share list of our members or display them to the public.
Mm-hmm.
But we can do it if we enter into a strategic and constructive engagement. Like, if there's a renewable energy company that wants to do that with us, mm-hmm. we need to see that, like what Malam Suleiman talked about earlier. Mm-hmm. What I decided is that I may not ask him to give me his details. How he asking me, I can talk to Sasu. She can now link us up. Then from there we'll take it up. So anybody that is in that sector who want to support SMEs, or the person must have some specifics, just as rightly pointed out to your question. Then when we engage each other, we'll be able to do that.
Okay. And how
to answer the question?
Well, to the best that you could, yes. If someone wants to contact you or the NASME, is there information online how they can do that?
Yes. I can even right away give you. Just let Osasu have my details.
Yep. So maybe through next year, your information can be shared.
Absolutely.
Okay, that's fine. So another question here. Is the agency, and this is a question for Suleiman, is the agency looking out for private sector investments, thus a PPP initiative to scale up rural electrification? And I think you touched on that already. Whether the agency is looking out for private sector investments, hence PPP initiatives, in order to scale up rural electrification.
I mean, thank you very much, sir. That's the whole idea. I mean, we've taken the private sector-led approach, right? And that's what I've been trying to explain from our EAI to NEP. As they're all, they're not projects that have been, that have budgetary allocation. For example, like the capital projects we have in the REA that looks at grid extension projects and, installation of streetlights and so on. So these are targeted 100% at private sector, and we encourage you to, come forward. That's why I made reference to the REA website. There's a lot of information on how companies can participate. A lot of countries in Africa, for example, some countries have taken the public sector-led approach where the government, would fund some of these projects, and they will give you exactly what the tariff would be. If you go to Ghana, for example, is 100% public sector-led. But here we have taken this approach so that we can be able to allow for this participation and also naturally grow the markets to a level where you no longer be needing subsidies or grants to be able to make mini grids or solar home systems commercially viable. So that's the angle. So yes, to your question, that's what we are encouraging, and that's what we're doing on these programs. Thank you.
Great, thank you for that, Suleiman. So there's a question here, and I think this question will probably benefit from your experience, Washima. The question here, I think, is from someone trying to play in this space. In an attempt to provide off-grid power to SMEs, the major challenge is the very high cost of initial installation. In what way can you please professionally advise on how to overcome this discouraging factor? For example, that a common barbershop will prefer to buy a 40,000 naira generator instead of going solar or renewable energy. So, I mean, is there any ways in your experience over the last few years you've been in business, you have seen or worked out any innovations that sort of help you manage, the financial burden to make it more affordable for the end user?
Thank you, Sele, for that question. So what we've realized is different businesses have solutions that work for them. And while a 40,000 generator may seem like the best option for a barber, we've noticed that there are solutions that will come and work seamlessly in that we look at what they need and we provide exactly what will work for them without any idle capacity. So I can basically I can tell the person who asked the question that there are solutions that are currently feasible and possible that would work for such setups and would in the long run not be as expensive as the 40,000 naira generator with the recurrent costs that come with it. So there are solar home system solutions that would work very clearly, all-in-one solutions that would work, and yeah. So for some businesses, there are even solutions that would work via a combination of a solar system and even your small generator, and will reduce your recurring cost. So these are things that we would usually discuss all of the options with our clients and inform them what would work best for them based on their time of use, based on the amount of energy they consume for their businesses, and things like that. So there are solutions that work. Yeah, we have tailor-made solutions for barbers, for instance, so which are very, very affordable. Yeah.
Thank you. So to the person that asked that question, again, I'm sure that you can get in touch with Washima and Prado Power, and they'll be able to help out in that regard. There was a question that I saw here and I've lost, but it's an important one. The question, and I'll try and recall. The question was that currently there's only one company that assembles solar products locally, and that's Oxano Power. What can be done or is being done by the government to create an enabling environment that will allow for other developers to start to manufacture locally as well, because this will hopefully help to reduce their costs. And then I guess on the back of that, I will extend. So that question is for Suleiman, but then a second aspect of that question to Washima. As a developer, is there any appetite for you to perhaps vertically integrate to then extend to local manufacture as well, or assembling of some of the devices and products that you deliver? So maybe Suleiman, you could start off, please.
Yeah, thank you for that question. First of all, I'd like to correct that impression that it's only Oxano Solar that is assembling PV. So it's not only Oxano Solar that is assembling solar PV or other related components. I think currently within the entire value chain that is looking at the solar PV up until maybe storage, recycling, for example, we have like 5 or 6 or even up to 8 companies that are in some capacity, assembling solar systems. For example, Naseni Solar Energy Limited is one. This is actually a government offshoot of Naseni that has a 7.5 megawatts capacity of solar PV assembly in Abuja here. So, for example, you have Ibeto, who is into battery recycling, and then you have companies like Blue Camel, A-Steven, that are into some level of assembly in the country. Yes, because of the amount of the demand that is there in the market right now, these capacities, if you put them together, I don't think you get up to 20 megawatts of installed capacity annual. So it is still very, very, very low compared to what we are looking at to sort of promote the local assembly or manufacture. The government is recently looking at launching a program that would, directly encourage this particular question that you've asked right now, which is to support the private sector with sort of low interest funding to be able to access funding and build these plants. Announcement is going to be made very soon, and companies would be encouraged to sort of apply to distribute or build mini grids initially in the first 6 to 12 months, and then beyond that, be able to establish assembly plants where the next set of supply or a deployment would be from homegrown kind of technology, home assembled systems. So let's watch out for that as well. Thank you.
Fantastic, thank you, and thank you for the clarification in terms of the number of businesses engaging in local manufacture as well. Washima, so the second part of that question was to you in terms of appetite from the developers to actually engage in this part of the business as well.
Okay, yeah. So in our we actually maybe at some point, but not in the immediate future, do we have plans to integrate into manufacturing, because it's a whole different business model involved in that. But then currently, what we do is we assemble our own brand of Volta inverters. So we assemble our inverters here.
Okay.
Inverters we use for our solar home systems. We do the assembly here on a very small scale. But yeah, we do that here and try to see how we can build capacity and have more people have the technical know-how in that regard. So for large scale manufacturing, not in the immediate future, but maybe we'll look into that at some point.
Okay, thank you, fantastic. I'm looking at the time now and it's fast spent, and that's unfortunate because there are quite a few questions and comments. So maybe next year we'll consider revisiting this particular topic, as it's clearly a hot one and it's the flavor of the month. But before I give the floor to each of the panelists for final words, just one comment for Mr. Ubiji, and this is from Shegun Adaju, the president of RIAN. He says that the association will like to engage with NASME formally via an MOU that will connect members of RIAN and NASME, and we can provide solutions such as pay-as-you-go or energy as a service. There are proven business models that can be scaled. So that's an invitation to you, Mr. Obiji, from the president of RIAN.
Thank you very much, Stele, and also the questioner. We are open to that. So you can get my contact through us too, and then we'll kick off from there and engage ourselves and see how we'll take it off. Thank you very much.
Fantastic. We will have to end the questions there now, for now, anyway. Thank you so much to all the panelists. Whilst you still have the mic, Mr. Luigi, maybe some last words from you, for in a minute.
Thank you once again, Sele. My last words will be like this. This renewable energy sector has huge potential for Nigeria, and all hands will be on deck to do that. I saw these opportunities very clearly some years ago. I traveled to Israel. I can tell you what I saw was marvelous, and they're using that very effectively, and we can replicate such. Now, with the advent of the African continental fleet, even though we've not really started it, but anytime this COVID thing slows down, we'll start it. It's a very good opportunity. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Obiji. Washima, over to you.
Okay. Yeah. So in terms of that words, I would just like to first of all thank Next Team for organizing this platform for us to share our experiences. I think I am familiar with Suleiman. Well, I'm just meeting AK, but then I think we're all united by our desire, singular desire to change the reality in the country. We've also discussed with a lot of our colleagues we really feel this urge to basically try and make things better in the office space for businesses and make things more dynamic, more affordable, energy more affordable and available to residents, to businesses, to urban communities. I mean, you see some of these communities are very, very interior, if I should put it that way. And when you provide a solution for them, the uptake is huge. It's very, very surprising. So there is the willingness to pay for electricity. There is the need for electricity. And I think it's very important that we all just continue to work together to have solutions and systems that would work and improve the lives of Nigerians. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Washima. And Suleiman, over to you, please, for your final comment.
Yeah, thank you, Sele, and thank you to my fellow panelists. It's good always to share the government's perspective on this space, and also to talk about some of the opportunities that are out there. I mean, on the side of the government, a lot of work has gone into developing this space. So we encourage the private sector to participate. And then also, I just wanted to say that, as much as we are encouraging, participation of developers and investors, we should also know that, the government grants are not here to stay forever, right? The idea for subsidies, the idea is for us to make the market, to mature the market to a level where we no longer need to have subsidies or grants to be able to provide access to electricity for people who need them. So a lot of work needs to be done by the private developers. You need to be very, very smart in your business models, and thinking about ways on how to reduce your hardware costs in the design of your systems, trying to encourage innovations and things like that. So at the REA, we are always available to support the private sector, and our programs. Most of our programs are open on a rolling basis. You don't need to, there's no timeline except for the tenders, but most of the programs of PBG, for example, and the OBF of the solar home systems are open on a rolling basis, and we allow for companies to apply, and then we provide them with guidance on how to go about it. And the EEI as well is always open. We're happy to continue this relationship towards providing power to the people who need the most. Thank you very much.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Suleiman. And I think one of the things you mentioned there was very key. Grants are not forever, and it's incumbent upon us to ensure that we mature the market enough that it's self-sustainable. We're on borrowed time now, so I'll be very quick. Thank you very much to all of every single member of the panelists. I think you represented the stakeholder community very well. Great to see what the government is doing very actively in taking forward steps. Fantastic to see that the SME community has a coordinated association that can lobby and advocate for it. And also great to hear from get the perspective of the developers and energy solution providers. A lot was discussed today in terms of the challenges, but importantly, the opportunities. So let's keep the conversation alive. Without the conversation, there is no action. Thank you to all the participants, and sorry that we couldn't take all of your questions. I will, before handing over to the organizers, I will just mention very quickly, someone asked a very good question, whether the recording of this session can be shared. So that's a question for the organizers. And then again, the question was raised about contacting the organizer and the panelists. So to the extent possible or permissible, perhaps that can be channeled again through next year. And on a lighter note, someone mentioned to me yesterday that whilst we have a fantastic panel, it would be nice if we had some female panelists as well in the future. The term that was coined was MANEL, all male panel. So in the spirit of gender balance, that's another note for next year. But I think we all agree that the contributions today were very insightful and valuable. Thank you very much, everyone. Please stay safe. And I hand back now to next year.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for being here from the beginning to the end of this session. It's really much appreciated. Your questions have been insightful. And before I give my closing remarks, I'm really glad to announce that Rian is willing to go as far as signing an MOU with NASME to come to some sort of agreement on how renewable energy solutions can be provided for some of the SMEs. I think that's a great step. And that's something that next year is going to do its best to be an intermediary to follow up on to ensure that that partnership becomes a reality. So I want to say thank you to all our panelists. Mr. Washima Mede, thank you for your time. Thank you for sharing developer perspectives. Thank you, Mr. Baba Manu, for giving us the perspectives of the government on what REA is doing. Thank you so much, Mr. Obiji. You gave fresh perspectives of the SME space. I mean, we usually have just people from the power sector speak, but it was great to have someone from a different sector entirely this time around. And for our able moderator, thank you so much. Thank you for handling the panel. Thank you for handling the audience. And as for those who asked for the recording, yes, the recording will definitely be shared. We are going to put everything into a package and we're going to share with you alongside the reports. And for those who asked about contacts to NASME, we would reach out to you individually to provide what is permissible, as the moderator already mentioned. So I want to say thank you once again for being part of this session. You made it a huge success. And I want to wish you all a wonderful weekend. Thank you and have a good weekend.
Thank you, Sasu.
Thank you very much. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.